Sound, music, sustainability. Welcome to Sustain FM. When people are asked what kind of neighborhood they want to live in, they often say they want a quiet neighborhood. But by quiet, they don't mean silent. People want to hear the sounds of children playing, birds in the trees, glasses clinking at cafés, but they may not want to hear the sounds of traffic, construction, or planes overhead. They may want to preserve the sounds of the past or hear something completely different in the future. That's why we built the Future Soundscape project. This project connects with local residents to record on their phones sounds they want to hear more of and sounds they want to hear less of in the future. The sounds are collected, categorized, and a soundscape of the future neighborhood co-created with the collaborative inputs of local residents. The project has taken place in Gothenburg, Sweden, most recently in Utrecht Netherlands, and coming soon to Berlin and Oslo Norway. Today we dive into the why and how of Future Soundscapes and get to hear what happened in the location so far. I'm your host, Steve Williams, also known as drusnoise, and today's episode will be a little bit different. Usually I interview... I'm your host, Steve Williams, also known as drusnoise, and today's episode will be a little bit different. Usually I'm interviewing an artist about their approach to sound, music, and sustainability and sharing an excerpt of their work. Today I'll be talking about my own Future Soundscape project and sharing some excerpts from performances in Gothenburg and Utrecht. I think it's been a fascinating approach to futures, and I hope you find it interesting too. Definitely send me a DM, let me know in the comments what you think, and my email is info@drusnoise.com. So let's get into it. So I started thinking about this project from a couple of directions. First, when we talk about the future, we often use visual metaphors like roadmap, foresight, vision, direction. And I was curious what it would be like to think and talk about a sustainable future with audio and sound metaphors. What might that sound like, and how might that open up different ways of thinking about futures? And the second idea was playing with this idea of soundscapes. So soundscapes have been around for a long time and are very popular in the sound art community. And the term first came up in the 1970s, coined by a researcher and sound artist, Murray Schafer. And there's actually a great National Film Board documentary from Canada that I'll link to, where you can interview and hear him talking about his approach. And there's a lot of background behind it, but one of the key ideas is this idea of soundscape as preservation and conservation. How do we notice and capture and preserve soundscapes in the face of change like urban development and technology? This approach can be very powerful artistically and also politically, as it gives a different way of communicating our connection to nature and prompts us to think about what we want to keep the same and what we want to preserve. So I was interested in how we could use soundscapes to think about the future. What would the future soundscape of a neighborhood be? What are the sounds that are missing today we want to hear in the future? And what do we hear now that we don't want to hear in the future? I'm also interested in how we think about sound and noise, especially in cities. When Felipe Varesche and I talked a while ago on the show, I mentioned how clubs are perceived in Berlin. So techno clubs now are considered cultural institutions like the opera and the symphony. But the sound from clubs is regulated as industrial noise. So what does that mean for our neighborhoods? And who gets to make those kind of decisions? What do we consider sound? What do we consider noise? And what do we want that to be like in the future? So with this project, I had some support from the Urban Futures Research Group at Chalmers University in Gothenburg, and I was able to get a little bit of funding to try this out. We did a small pilot in Berlin to test out the process and the tech setup, then a version in the Lindholmen neighborhood in Gothenburg in April 2024, and then another version in Utrecht in August 2024. And the process was roughly the same in each location, but the results, as you'll hear, are quite different. So in each city, we started with a full-day workshop, and this was really designed to be open to anyone. We started the day talking about sound, soundscapes, hearing and listening, and some of the basics of field recording. Then we went out for a walk, and everyone recorded sounds on their phones that they wanted to hear more of and less of in the future. And the idea was to both search for sounds, things that we wanted to find, and also be open to noticing hidden sounds that are all around us. For example, if you live in a city, you may have kind of tuned out the background traffic sounds, but they're always there. But when you start doing recording, you notice these sounds that were a little bit hidden before. Then we came back to the workshop space and split into groups. and each group picked 5 sounds they wanted to work with because we had way too many recordings to edit with. So each group picked 5 and then did some collaborative sound design with EQ and effects and levels, and also setting the start and end points of the recordings. Each group also came up with an arrangement of their sounds, and we listened back to each group and our collective Future Soundscapes. And the workshops were designed to be accessible to anyone, not needing sound design experience. We actually had people ranging from 9 years old to 80 years old attend, and really quite a wide variety of people. Some that had sound backgrounds, some that didn't, some that were interested in cities, some people that just showed up and found it online. So really interesting collection of people and backgrounds. And specifically just use phones for recording to make it easy. And I also set up a simple sound editing tools using TouchOSC on iPads connected to Ableton. So everyone could edit the sounds, but not really need to get into the guts of Ableton and figure out how all those kind of things work. So here are a couple of examples for what the groups put together from Lindholm and Utrecht. And one of the things, just to be clear here, is that these are the sounds that the participants put together. They edited the sounds, they arranged the sounds. The only thing I did was adjust a little bit of the EQ and also adjust some of the levels so they were relatively the same for each recording group. So have a quick listen and see what you think. So one of the things I find really interesting about this and what came up with the future is the similarities and differences in the different cities. You hear some of the similarities. There are some sound of birds, some sound of water, some sound of people. But each location was quite different, but also had a similar background. In Lindholmen, in Gothenburg, that neighborhood used to be the center of the shipbuilding industry. So until the 1980s, they were building cargo ships and passenger ships, and the dominant sounds you heard there, and actually all across the city, were rivet guns and construction and horns, all those kind of things that you'd hear on an industrial site. But that industry went away in the 80s. And the neighborhood has now been rebuilt as more of like a tech park. So there's outposts of the Chalmers University, Gothenburg University. There's a science park there, lots of tech companies, some residential, but it's really changed quite a bit. Similar with the Utrecht neighborhood in the Vuxspoor, that used to be the location where the Netherlands Railways built all their locomotives. So also very industrial, also a lot of riveting, welding, drilling, cutting up metal kind of sounds. But is also now changed, and there's also tech parks there. There's also a lot of arts centers, recording studios, kids' play parks, restaurants, some clubs. So it's changed quite a bit. So in both of the neighborhoods, there's legacies of the old history, but the neighborhood's in the middle of radical change. There's new developments going in Utrecht. There's going to be a couple of thousand new residential units. In Lindholmen, there's the Karlatornet, which is the tallest residential tower in all of Scandinavia. That's right in the middle of that neighborhood. And whether you love it or hate it, it's there, and you can see it from all across the city. So it's an interesting way of thinking about how do we think about sounds as well as the visual environment there. So after those workshops, that was like a one-day thing. So I had all of the recordings from the participants. And then I created a live performance of the past, present, and future soundscapes of those neighborhoods. So I got the past soundscapes building from archival footage that I found online and got permission to use. For the present soundscapes, I used my own field recordings, and the future soundscapes came from the workshops that were co-created by the participants. And once again, for the future, I only added some light EQ and managing the levels, since the recordings had very different sound levels when they came in from the participants. So to give you an idea of what that whole performance sounds like, here's an excerpt from the live performance in Gothenburg at the theater, and I apologize for my Swedish pronunciation, Aftonsjärnen in Gothenburg. So one of the other things I really enjoyed is not just sharing the performances and sharing the sounds back with local residents and people who created the Future Soundscapes, was a chance to actually have conversations and discussions during the workshop, after the performance, and talk about what we heard, what we didn't hear, what was missing, and the potential value of sound in futures. And one of the most interesting questions that emerged from that was this idea of why nature? So participants in almost all the workshops, they all wanted sounds of nature. So whether that was birds or water or wind in the trees, sounds of animals, that kind of thing was quite common. But the more interesting question was why? And one of the things that came out was this idea of connecting to nature, living harmoniously with nature, breaking down the barriers between humans and nature, where it's easy to think about sort of humans on one side and nature on the other side, but it's not really like that. We're actually living in nature. We are part of nature. So what does that mean for how we could introduce those sounds? So we could do something with a technological solution, which is done before in, for example, shopping malls, where we just play back recordings of bird songs. So yes, okay, we have the sounds of nature, but is that really the kind of nature that we want to live in a city? So we could think about maybe other ways to do that. And one great example was the sound of water in cities. This is something that came up, that a lot of people wanted to hear the sound of water, which actually makes sense because Gothenburg is on the fjord, it's right on the water, it's built with shipbuilding. Utrecht, like a lot of major cities in the Netherlands, is built on the canals. There's a lot of ship traffic there, so it makes sense that people would want that sound of water. And one approach often taken by urban planners is introduction of constructed water features. So building fountains or waterfalls or streams that are made of concrete. So you bring water back into the city that way. But an alternative, it could have been uncovering or daylighting the streams that are already in our cities that we've buried by layers of roads and infrastructure. And that's kind of a different approach. It's around revealing the sounds of water, revealing water that's already been there, which is also very similar to what Lacey and other sound artists have been focusing on, this idea of revealing hidden sounds. So not necessarily introducing new sounds, but revealing the sounds that are already there. And also might model a move from this idea of just living in nature to living with nature. What would it mean to actually coexist or think about humans as part of a natural environment as we build and design our cities? So there's a lot of really interesting ideas there that I found. It's not that the soundscapes and the future soundscapes solve these problems, but really introduce some interesting questions and potential approaches, I think. And I really think there might be some potential to use this in city planning in the future as we start to design these sounds, because city planners and urban developers, they do think about sound a lot with cities, but it tends to be more about sound as noise. How do we mitigate and get rid of construction noise, traffic noise, airplane noise? And that's important, but not really thinking about what are the kind of soundscapes that we want to create, and what kind of rhythms do we want to do? How are we going to compose a city and really create the soundscape and the rhythms that we're going to live in the future? And how do we make sure that we create that and it's not created for us by forces outside of our control? So, yeah, that's a bit of an overview of the project. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to continuing that. As I mentioned at the top, doing another version in Berlin later this year and in Oslo, Norway, at sometime in the beginning of 2025. Still figuring out the venue for that. Be sure to sign up for our email list on sustain.fm. Follow us on Instagram and make sure to get all the details of what's coming up. So before we close out this month's episode with a recording of the Utrecht performance, I do have to thank a long list of partners and supporters that I could not have pulled off this project without. So in Gothenburg, I mentioned Chalmers University, also the Center for Sustainable Urban Futures, the City of Gothenburg, Gothenburg Center for Sustainable Development, the Radio Museum, Lindholmen Science Park, the Theater Aftonshjärnan. Also in Utrecht, that visit and that performance was supported by Culture Moves Europe, as well as the residency at Acid Solder Club and Creative Coding Utrecht. And the biggest thanks really needs to go to all the workshop participants, the people that showed up and spent a whole day talking about sound, recording sound, thinking about sound, and doing that in Gothenburg and Utrecht and the pilot workshop that we had in Berlin. So be sure to check out sustain.fm/FSS for more detail on the project, all the recordings, videos of the performances, and also a link to a paper I wrote and presented at the International Sustainability Transitions Conference in Oslo in June this year, if you want to get an idea of some of the research behind that and what some of the potentials in the future. So please do check out the links in the show notes. Get in touch in the comments or by email to info@drusnoise. Thanks for listening and thanks for thinking about sound and futures.
Ten behoeve van de spoorwegen bouwen 2 grote Nederlandse industrieën een serie van 25 elektrische locomotieven. Werkspoor Utrecht, waar deze opnamen gemaakt werden, zorgt voor het mechanische gedeelte. Hemaf Hengelo neemt de hele elektrische apparatuur voor zijn rekening. De bovenbouw van de nieuwe machines bestaat uit een geheel stalen geraamte, waaroverheen een plaatbekleding wordt aangebracht, die evenals de spanten zelf elektrisch wordt gelast. Dit lassen vormt wel het belangrijkste onderdeel van de werkzaamheden die verricht moeten worden. In totaal wordt per locomotief ruim 2300 meter lasnaad gelegd. De wielassen van de machines worden aangedreven door zware elektromotoren van 500 paardenkracht elk. Deze zijn in Hengelo vervaardigd en worden hier in de onderstellen gemonteerd. De gehele elektrische apparatuur is ondergebracht in een grote schakelkast die apart wordt gereed gemaakt. Wanneer het inwendige van de machine zo goed als klaar is, wordt deze schakelkast er in zijn geheel ingehesen. Vaardige handen weten snel de juiste verbindingen tot stand te brengen uit de wirwar van draden en kabels. Iedere 10 dagen wordt zo het tractiepark van de Nederlandse spoorwegen met 1 elektrische locomotief uitgebreid. Deze dagen werd de eerste van de serie 1200 in aanwezigheid van de directie der spoorwegen in gebruik genomen. Een gebeurtenis die gepaard ging met het doorbreken van het traditionele lint. Tijdens de eerste rit behaalde de 100 ton wegende machine een snelheid van 130 km per uur. En dat is dan nog 20 kilometer beneden de maximumsnelheid. In ons land rijden nog steeds ruim 600 stoomlocomotieven. Hun aantal wordt echter niet meer uitgebreid. De ingebruikneming van de nieuwe elektrische machines, de eerste van Nederlands fabrikant, zal in de toekomst leiden tot een aanzienlijke besparing van steenkool.
zodat hij door de poolkern op zijn plaats gehouden onder constante druk op de bestaande zitting wordt geklemd. schijtel van de draaibank. De machine doet alles vanzelf. Tenminste, als er een uitstekend vakman voor zich houdt. Nadat de as gedraaid is, worden de verschillende zittingen voor rollwagers, rotorkruis, commutator en ronsel geslepen om aan de hoge eisen die de constructeur aan de passingen stelt te voldoen. De boring van het rotorkruis moet zuiver concentrisch zijn met het buitenomtrek en het spiegelplat oppervlak zetten.
Weet jij of op ons balkon een luchtballon was? Ja, bij Lucky Day maak je namelijk elke dag kans op 450.000 euro. Bepaal zelf.
with a sustainable and healthy ecosystem, not disrupting the natural balance. No waste, no pollution. Taking care of our climate, biodiversity and human well-being. We have a choice to make the change towards a sustainable, conscious way of living. Welcome to Cartesius, an urban oasis right in the heart of health. The city of Utrecht, the Netherlands. Cartesius builds upon the science of the bruises, where people live longer, happier, and healthy lives. An urban city district where nature and biodiversity thrives. A community that lives happy together. Active, meaningful living is facilitated. A neighbourhood without cars, where smart mobility is an obvious choice. With a healthy food environment. Buildings that are net zero and work seamlessly with the city's smart grid. People take care of nature, each other, and their
meisje bij mij.
Contract laten ontbinden daar, dat was ook een financiële kwestie.
Ja, eigenlijk. Ja, vreemd is hoe ik het ervoor stel. Door dit, zeg maar, de club helpen.
Okay, thanks for listening to Sustain. Hope to catch you again next time. Be sure to sign up for our email list on our website, sustain.fm. Follow our Instagram, also sustain.fm, and get more info on the radio show, in-person events in different cities, live streams, and more. All right, until next time, see you on the dance floor.